What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another Touchdowns to Home Runs. And today we got a very, very special Auburn schedule breakdown because it's not only me in this video. I have some very, very special guests from the War Report, Auburn fan channel that does an amazing job. Guys, I tell you, if you're an Auburn fan or just a football fan in general, this is the channel for you, especially if you're an Auburn fan. They go through everything about Auburn, break down players, schedule, coaches, everything on Auburn, and even a special segment, something that I really, really like about them. They do this segment called Chop It Up with a Pro, where they bring in an ex-Auburn football player to break down film with them. So the War Report, guys, introduce yourselves. I'm so excited to have you here, and we're just going to talk some Auburn football, which you guys are definitely used to, and we're going to really break down the schedule this year, because if you guys have seen my 2021 early predictions of Auburn's, of course, that's me as a South Carolina Gamecocks fan or an SEC fan in general, and an outsider looking in. But today I got some real insiders on the Auburn football program, and today we're just really going to crack down on the schedules. Guys, welcome to Touchdowns to Home Runs, and I'm so excited to have you here for this video.
Hey, man, thanks for having us.
Yep, glad to be here.
Anytime, anytime. So from that 2021 early prediction show that I did for Auburn, I had the wins, toss-ups, and losses categories that I made for Auburn. I split them all up. I went through what games I think this season will be wins for Bryan Harsin's first season, what games I think are toss-ups, are a little bit too shady right now to call, and then I have my losses. So today we're going to go through all of that, go through each and every game, and really hear from what Auburn fans think about each and every game. Because you might think, oh, they're Auburn fans, of course they're going to think they're going to win every game. But I'm telling you, these guys know their team inside and out. And they're going to be honest, and they are going to really tell us how they think Bryan Harsin is going to do in our first season. So with the schedule, with Auburn this season, how do you think they do in their first game? I'm pretty sure their first game is against Akron, opening up the season, opening up Bryan Harsin's first season ever. What do you see for, even we could talk about those first two games. What are you expecting to see, and what are you looking for in those first two games versus Group of 5 teams or FCS teams in Akron and Alabama State?
Yeah, what I'm feeling like is those first two games. I'm actually glad that our first two games are going to be warm-up games, because I'm expecting to see us trying to get our legs up underneath us for, especially offensively. We've got a new system coming in, completely new, more pro-style system that we're going to be running this year. So what I anticipate is those first two games are going to look a little messy. We're going to be trying to figure it out. But what I hope to see is a lot of points being put up so that we can get some reserves in there and not have to struggle through 4 quarters against lesser competition. But I don't anticipate us struggling with those teams just from a pure talent perspective. But I do anticipate the first half, especially against Akron, is probably going to be a little choppy, a little dicey for the offense, just trying to figure out how to get things in motion. But I anticipate we'll pull those out with no problem.
I actually expect to see nothing close to what's going to be a finished product versus Akron in that first game. I mean, we are changing from a hurry-up, no-huddle, spread type attack to something that will have a lot more pro-style concepts. And, you know, they've only had 15 practices so far with this new coaching staff and this system to try to get accustomed to the new things that they're going to be asked to do. So in game one, I'm happy. In previous years, we started out off with some really, really tough opponents in game one, right? Last year, I believe we were supposed to have North Carolina to start the season. That would have been a disaster this year. So starting off with the Zips, I think is just what the doctor ordered to help us kind of get our legs under us to start the season. You know, some SEC teams take a lot of heat for not playing a Group of 5 school in that first game to start the season. You know, we've got the Chick-fil-A kickoff that happens in Atlanta where 2 big teams play each other. Usually it's like Big Ten versus SEC or ACC versus SEC. And this year, this is what we needed. This is what we needed coming off, you know, a tough year where we had no spring the prior year. And now we have a new system and everybody's got to get adjusted. So I look for them to just try to figure out what's what in that first game versus Akron, and then followed by Alabama State.
Just like you said, especially with the first-year coach and everything, bringing in 2 weaker opponents to start off your schedule isn't a bad thing at all. I don't think anyone outside of the SEC should crucify you for that because, again, we play in the SEC. Your regular season in the SEC is going to be hard enough. So it's a nice 2 easy opponents that should get Bryan Harsin and this team settled in. But then you look at week 3 for Auburn. You travel to Happy Valley, Pennsylvania to take on the Penn State Nittany Lions in one of the most hostile environments in college football. Now, we don't know yet with COVID. Hopefully, we're looking at a season where we could see full fans in the stadiums. But let's say there is full fans, full capacity in that stadium in Penn State. Do you think that this Auburn team, a young and inexperienced Auburn team, especially the coaching staff too, will be able to go into Penn State, which, let's be real, Penn State is also coming off a down year too. James Franklin, they're expected to have their team back up. How do you expect Auburn to go into Penn State, and how do you think they'll perform there?
That one, I agree with your assessment about it being a toss-up. I'm not really ready to call a winner for that game, but what I do anticipate is Penn State themselves are going to be trying to figure some things out. They've got some new coordinator hires that they have on staff there. And then they had some experience leave along the defensive line. They're changing a little bit of what their defensive philosophy is going to be. So I do anticipate Penn State still trying to work some things out as well. The problem that I have for Auburn specifically, besides the youth, is over the last few years, our offense has not traveled well. Right. And so what I'm looking for is hopefully the first two games we figured out some things offensively and that we can go up there and, they say a lot of times defense travels, run game travels. Right. So hopefully we've solidified our ability to run block and can get up to Penn State and work the run game, and our defense will be able to keep us in a space where we can be within striking distance to pull out a victory. But definitely too early for me to call that game. But I do anticipate there being some issues early in Happy Valley for sure.
I've actually got this in the loss column for Auburn. Traditionally, our quarterback has not played well on the road. I don't think that he has to have the best game of his career versus Penn State, but I do think that he needs to take some steps forward. And you can still learn a lot in a loss. Right. So, with this game on the schedule, I have Auburn coming out of the month of September 3-1, with this being the only loss in our schedule. I saw an amazing clip a couple of years ago. It was the first play of Penn State, Michigan. And if we are anywhere near to capacity, by the time that game rolls around in September, it's going to be a tough place to play. Michigan couldn't even get the first snap off. It was so loud. That is one of the hardest places to play in college football. So again, I'm not saying we have no chance, but for a team that is switching systems and may still be trying to get their legs up under them, by the third game, this is a tough place to go play. Despite what Penn State did last season, they have had continuity in coaching. James Franklin has shown a clear plan for development, and they may have had a down year last year, but they finished the year, I thought, on a high note, and I expect them to springboard into 2021 playing well enough to be what will be a brand new Auburn team. So again, I think you can learn a lot in the loss. If you're going to lose one early, this is the game you'll lose before you get into SEC play. So I got this one in the loss column for Auburn.
Yeah, I completely agree. Especially Big Ten fans going up against SEC fans, it's always a competition for who's the best conference. So I guarantee you, Penn State fans, when they have an SEC team come into their territory, they are going to be loud and they are going to let you know that you are not the home team there. So it will be a very hostile environment if Auburn is going into a full capacity stadium, but it should be a very, very good out of conference game and something that we really love to see in college football because it kind of gives us a sense of which conference are kind of the stronger conferences. So that game is going to be very interesting on top of, let's say, Georgia Clemson, on top of Alabama, Miami, in all of the out-of-conference games that the SEC will have this season. Then you go back to the Plains, you go back to Auburn and take on Georgia State. Now, Georgia State, again, Sun Belt team, Group of 5 team. After that tough game in Penn State and you're preparing for a big game where you travel to Death Valley, what are you going to be looking for in this Georgia State game? Is there anything that you're going to be looking for in terms of just really working on one position group to really, really have a strong game? Or what's kind of the take going into that Georgia State game?
I'm not super familiar with whether or not Georgia State is still going to be running that triple option attack that they've been running the last couple of years. If that's the case, then I'm just looking for us to be strong defensively, right? I just want to see the defensive front play well against the run and make sure that we are limiting possessions for that team. It's always awkward when you're playing a team that's doing the triple option because it's not something that you're going to see often. So we're just looking for the defense to be disciplined that game, and for the offense to get out early and to get our starters off of the field as quickly as possible. Like, I just really want people to be able to rest up as we get into SEC play. So I'm hoping that Georgia State provides enough of a buffer from, a tough game in Happy Valley, get our starters out of the game early, second half, get some other guys in there, and we're able to rest up so that we can be ready for SEC play.
By the time this game hits, this is going to be the fourth game. I'm looking for us to establish what kind of offensive identity we're going to have for the season. So you've had 3 games to figure it out, right? You've had 2 cupcake games. You've got a really tough road test at Penn State. And by game 4, you hope that the identity of your football team starts to take shape. Now, we've been a different kind of team for the last 8 years under our last coach, under our new coach, running what is widely known as the multiple offense. A lot of fans want to know what that is. What does that mean? I mean, we've got a brand new wide receiver core. We had 3 top receivers all went pro this offseason. You've got a quarterback in his 3rd year who has to learn a different system, and you got a running back who should be all SEC this year. But you also have an offensive line that was very maligned last year, and they've got to take the next step forward too. So what I'll be looking for is, have we established ourselves in the trenches offensively? Right? Can we dominate the line of scrimmage against weaker teams? And if they're not doing that by game 4, I'm going to start to get a little worried, because that October schedule looks pretty tough.
That leads us into the big game, the big road game in Death Valley. And let's look at last year. Bo Nix arguably had his best game the whole season against LSU secondary last season. Now, that game was at Jordan-Hare Stadium. How does that change when you travel to LSU? Like, again, if we get full capacity, how will that change the game? And will Auburn be as dominant against an LSU team who, let's be honest, they struggled last season? They have the talent to be a really good team. Will Ed Ogeron and that LSU team be more prepared for the season, and more importantly, be more prepared for the Auburn Tigers coming to their home this year?
Listen, Noah, this is a tough one for Auburn fans. We have not won in Death Valley in 20 years. It's been a while since Auburn has gone in there and gotten a win. It is a really tough place to go play. So the environment here will rival that of Penn State, if not worse. Their fans are raucous, and I thought that they also ended the season on a high note. But when you talk about LSU, you talk about a team who has been bringing in top 10 recruiting classes, for the last decade. So there is no shortage of talent down on the Bayou. And it's the SEC, so there are no weeks off. This is not a week off. Now I know that we took them by surprise last year. They were kind of doing a quarterback carousel when they ran into us. They established Max Johnson as the starter by the end of the season. They have a quarterback battle going on between Brennan and Johnson here to see, but both those guys looked competent. Brennan to start the season and Johnson to end it. So depending on who's starting there, I just expect it to be a slugfest. Auburn is still going to be figuring some things out early in the season. I do think that if there were any year that we could go into LSU and win it, it would be this year. Right. I mean, they lost a ton of talent to the draft, this is a tough one for me. We've been watching our team go down there and lose for almost 2 decades. Right. And breaking that cycle is not going to be an easy task for this Auburn team.
For me, it's really going to be about what LSU defense shows up. I fully expect the LSU offense to be back on track, at least in the passing attack. Their run offense has been up and down the last couple of years. I mean, they've been solid in the run game. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is, obviously a capable back, but they have been primarily a pass first team by all accounts when they were successful in the last few years. But the defense really has been what has been the struggle for them last year specifically. And that's really why we put up so many points on them. It's just their defense was not capable. I can think of the series in particular where we started on our 1 yard line and we ended up scoring on that drive just because their defense was out of position so much throughout that game. Our defense helped us out a lot and put our offense in good position. But it's really going to be for me about what LSU defense shows up. That defense was not good last year. They went out there and Mississippi State put it on them. Missouri put it on them. We put it on them, right? And so if the LSU defense is better, then this is going to be a competitive game. If not, then it may be competitive, but I fully anticipate our defense showing up in a strong way. And I think our secondary is going to be the strength of that defense. So they're going to need their defense to show up. Otherwise, it's going to be a long day for LSU.
So you come off of that LSU game in Death Valley and you come back home to Auburn to take on the Georgia Bulldogs. Every single odd number season for Auburn, especially you look at 2013, you look at 2017, it usually seems like there's some magic in that stadium when, let's say, Georgia or Alabama comes in. Do you think that Auburn will have enough to go up against a very competitive Georgia Bulldogs team on the offensive side of the ball and the defensive side of the ball? Look, Georgia can be one of the best teams in all of college football this year. They can be a potential playoff contender. Does Auburn have what it takes in Brian Harsin's first season to go and compete with the Bulldogs?
I think so, but this is going to be a completely homer answer right here. I'm going to be honest about a couple of things. I think that Georgia's offense last year was lackluster, right? Their offense wasn't great. Unfortunately, they had one of their top receivers go down to injury prior to the season in George Pickens. JT Daniels is supposed to be the truth, and we'll see how that pans out. I anticipate if you go back and look at last year's game against Georgia, we got dominated in the trenches on both sides of the ball. I anticipate a lot of those guys are going to remember that, and we're going to be playing a lot tougher in the trenches. And that's going to make this game a lot more interesting because, again, Georgia's offense wasn't great for the majority of that year, and their defense actually ended up being a little disappointing as it got into the year. They've lost a lot of their strength in their secondary. Of course, they're just going to reload a lot of that stuff. Kirby Smart, a strong defensive mind, but they're going to be inexperienced. I don't know how much game time experience they're going to need to be able to go up against what is going to be a completely different offense that Auburn's going to be showing. And it's going to challenge them in ways that they had not been previously challenged in our losing, I won't say a losing streak because we did win in 2017, but still, I do anticipate this game is going to be tougher than people anticipate. I'm not ready to call this a loss yet either, but I am willing to say that Georgia is going to be a very tough out for us this season. Just going to really depend upon how well Georgia's offense is going to be able to perform against what I believe is going to be the strength of our team and being our defense.
This one is a tough one for me. Georgia's been kicking our butt for a while now, and we have some one-offs here, like Ike mentioned in 2017. But then we turn around and we get run off the field in the SEC championship couple weeks later that same year. So again, it's the SEC. Everybody's got talent. You're talking about another team that's been recruiting, top 10 to top 5 classes. So there's no shortage of talent there. When they get quarterback play, they're dangerous. What I'm looking for here is you mark this one in the loss column. Noah, I'm standing with you on this one. I just think for a team that will be figuring a lot of stuff out, this is still going to be a pretty tough game for Auburn. I don't see any easy SEC wins on the schedule, and certainly not Georgia, right? So, I know it is an odd year, but I'm not. I just think that Coach Harsin is going to have to really pull some things together, and having this game in the middle of the season, I'm not sure for us this year is going to be better than having it at the end of the season where it traditionally has been. So the month of October is tough. I mean, in the SEC, we talk about it a lot. You find out what kind of football team you're going to be in the month of October, right? And if you can come out of that stretch 2-2, you probably did a good job. And this is going to be one of those L's on that schedule in my book. I think that, what we're looking for, and I'm stressing, is you don't have to win this game to show that you're progressing and moving forward. Though they just need to show that they can be competitive, be competitive in the trenches. I expect our defense to show up, but if we're losing the field position battle because we cannot move the ball offensively against what will be a very stout Georgia defense, then it's going to be a long day for the Auburn Tigers.
Yeah, Ike, I just want to go back on a point that you made where the game last year, and I think the game this year will definitely depend on how the trenches are won on both sides of the ball. Like you look at last year, the running game, it wasn't like Stetson Bennett went out and had some amazing game. He was just able to manage everything on the field for Georgia and really just let that rushing game work. He had some big throws at some points, but it was really the rushing game with like Zamir White, with James Cook, that really carried them. And that's what you're going to be looking for in this game. Georgia does come in with one of the better O-lines and the better running back rooms in the SEC this season. So that will be definitely something to look forward to. And how is Auburn's D-line going to go up against the Georgia running back room? It's going to be very interesting. But then we head into a game where Auburn heads to a team that is on the rise, a team that looked to be the doormat of the SEC West for sure, especially last season. Sam Pittman goes into Arkansas, has a very, very good first season. And if you want to talk about controversy, the game against Auburn that Arkansas had at Jordan-Hare Stadium, obviously you guys would remember this. Bo Nix, the backward spike, and the whole controversy behind that. Should it have been a fumble? Should it have been marked down like it was? And then Auburn obviously goes out and kicks a game-winning field goal. Does anything feel like there's a sense of revenge going to come from this Arkansas team? And do you think they'll remember that? And do you think that environment in Arkansas is going to be even tougher? Again, like an Arkansas team who's on the rise. KJ Jefferson's going to be going into his first season under the helms at Arkansas. So how do you think Auburn will do against a young but a very fired up Arkansas team this year?
I've got this in the W column. Now, the SEC remembers. It never forgets. So that play that you referenced last year, I remember we did a show where some Arkansas fans came on and we were all commiserating over the win and said, you know what, we probably should have lost that game. And the guy said, this is the most honest comment I've ever read from Homer fans. And I was like, yeah, we didn't play well. The refs maybe kind of bailed us out in this one, but I do expect us to be a better team than Arkansas. Now, this is where with the talent gap here between Arkansas and Auburn, to me, is still pretty wide. So it'll come down to X's and O's, right? And I talked a little bit earlier about how after that fourth game or during that fourth game, you want to see that you're establishing some kind of identity on offense. By Arkansas, we better know what that identity is. So I expect them, whether we're just going to be a running football team because the pass game is not that effective, Arkansas is one of those teams where I expect us to be able to line up and play smash mouth football, and they can't stop it because we have better athletes than they are. Anything less is completely unacceptable. This is a game you absolutely positively have to win for the morale of your team. And October is tough. If you lose an Arkansas game, your season is coming off the rails at this point because the schedule doesn't get easier. So I got this in the W column for Auburn, definitely.
Yeah, for me, it's going to be very similar into the fact that we should know what we're doing offensively by this point. I anticipate because they are going to have a less experienced quarterback starting for Arkansas and still trying to themselves figure out their offensive identity, that our defense is going to have to do a lot of work to just create favorable situations for us offensively if we have not figured it out offensively ourselves and are just able to exert our will. But again, hopefully by that point, we come in there completely healthy and we're able to just run roughshod over them. That's my sincere hope. I'm still in the cautious, optimistic place as a fan until I see something on the field as to whether or not we're going to be able to pull off some sort of offensive identity switch that will allow us to be a little bit more dominant, specifically with our offensive line being so, whatever it was last year, it wasn't good, but it was there. They were on the field. But yeah, I'm just hoping that we have a little bit more of an offensive identity. Arkansas's defense was pretty good last year, so we're going to need to be able to do that. I still anticipate us winning this game, like Mike said, just because of a talent gap. And I anticipate our execution is going to be a little more crispy. That doesn't mean that we're going to be, scoring 63 points like we did a couple of years ago on him, but it does mean that I don't anticipate our offense putting us in a lot of bad positions so that we can just go out there and have a solid game and get out of there with a W. That's all I need.
So next, this is a game that really, really interests me because this is a team that if you've been following my channel for a while, I'm really high on this team. And it's because I think that they're just so good on the offensive side of the ball. You go back home and you take on the Ole Miss Rebels. Matt Corral, in my opinion, I put my whole SEC rankings, quarterbacks, ranked all the quarterbacks, and I had Matt Corral as my number one quarterback in there, even in the rest of the offense too. Like you got Ely and Connor in the backfield. I think this Ole Miss team, yes, defensively, they lack a lot in the secondary. They lack a lot as a whole defensively, but Lane Kiffin is a coach on the rise for Ole Miss, and Ole Miss is coming in as a strong team this year. You get them at home. What are going to be the keys of this game if Auburn wants to? This could be a true 50-50 game. What are the keys to this game that Auburn is going to have to do to be able to come out with a big home win against a very, very good and competitive Ole Miss team?
So we talked a lot about offensive identity, but by this point in the season, I expect our defensive identity to be well established. Listen, I'm a believer in Lane Kiffin and his ability to be able to develop quarterbacks and to implement a competent system that gets the ball to playmakers in space, right? He's proven that. I thought that they showed marked improvement in year one under Lane Kiffin. So this is a scary game for Auburn fans. There was a time where we would check Ole Miss as almost an automatic win. I don't think that we can do that exactly this year. So that October slate is looking really brutal when you cap it with this game. Now, I have another prediction here. It's going to be a little bit of a hot take. If we have not established an offensive identity by this game, this is where I expect us to see a quarterback switch. So if we're not moving the ball and we're one-dimensional and we're run, and teams are loading the box to stop Tank and Shivers, who I expect to be effective, if we can have balance, I think this is where you see Demetrius Davis start to take over this team. For a year one coaching staff that they want to win now, they have top 10 talent. Auburn has recruited on average top 10 talent around ranked around number 9 over the last decade. So the talent cupboards aren't bare on the plains. And this is where you might see that this coaching staff tries to establish what kind of team they're going to be moving forward, right? If we're still struggling going into this game. So, if at halftime of this game, if it's Ole Miss 28, Auburn 7, I expect to see some changes offensively. And I expect the coaching staff to prepare a plan for just such an event. So mark this game on your calendar, definitely.
For me, this one is going to be strength on strength. If you follow the War Report channel, you know that I'm high on our secondary. I'm high on Derek Mason being a cultivator of good secondary play. So I anticipate our secondary being challenged in this game just because I think that, as Mike said, Lane Kiffin is just a really inventive play designer. He's good at strategizing ways to get his options open. They did lose their top receiver to the draft this year. So, it's yet to be seen who is going to be their top target on that offensive side of the ball. But I do think that their quarterback is capable. He did show at points last year that he was also capable of giving the ball to the other team, though, right? So, I'm looking to see whether or not our defense is going to be opportunistic again this season, whether or not they've fully grasped that offensive philosophy that Lane Kiffin wants to do with new weapons on the outside. It's one thing for the quarterback to know where everybody's supposed to be and throwing the ball into those windows. It's another thing for the wide receivers to run the correct routes. Right. So if you have any miscues that are happening during that game and we're able to, from a defensive standpoint, confuse what they're doing between the communication between the quarterback and the wide receiver, Auburn can come out of here with another victory. I still am optimistic about our defense, again, being the strength of us in this game and coming out of this one with a W.
So next up, you travel to College Station, obviously in Texas, to take on the Texas A&M Aggies. Texas A&M, a team that was so close to making the playoffs last season. Again, I think they should have made the playoffs out of Notre Dame, but that's a topic for another time. But this Texas A&M team loses a chunk on the offensive line, and you see in their spring game, if you watch their spring game, the offensive line was rough. They bring in a new quarterback. You're going to have Haynes King or Zach Calzada as your starter this year, so a new starter for Texas A&M as Kellen Mond exits. But you still seem very, very optimistic about Texas A&M this season. You look at the running back room with Smith. You look at Spiller, you look at Atchin, you look at the receivers, you got DMAS, you got Lane, you look at the defense. A guy like DeMarvin Leal could be the best defensive player in all of college football on that D-line for Texas A&M. You travel to Texas A&M. I have this one in my wins, toss-ups, and losses marked down as a loss, but what do you guys see, and where do you think you can take advantage of Texas A&M to potentially come out of College Station with a massive, massive win in this game?
It's what you just talked about. Honestly, it's the offensive line. And it's whether or not that offensive line is gelled by that point. I am still not really sure what we have up front. The trenches are the thing that I am most worried about when I'm talking about Auburn's defense. I think that our linebackers and our secondary play is going to be solid. It's whether or not we're going to be dominant up front. And I anticipate Texas A&M having a heavy dose of run coming at us. They're going to be running downhill the entire game. You mentioned that running back room that's there. That's one of the best ones in the SEC to me. So I really think that we're going to have to be stout up front. They're going to try to choke the clock out and not put their young quarterbacks in a position where they have to win the game for them. And if they can do that, then they can win that game. I'd be more optimistic about Auburn winning this game if it were at home. It being on the road at College Station Not so sure whether or not we're going to be able to do that again. I need to see our offense travel, and I have not seen that for the last couple of years in Auburn. So until I am sure that we can go on the road and be dominant, I'm going to be reluctant to call us with a W on any games where we're going to be playing an offense that's fully capable on the other side. So that's yet to be seen. So I'm not really sure what to do with this one yet.
I've still got this one in the L column for Auburn. Listen, if you watch us, I've been high on Jimbo Fisher, and the job that he's doing there, developing talent. He clearly has a plan. What he did with Kellen Mond in his senior season, I thought was amazing. And the mark of the better teams is that when they lose players like they're losing on offensive line, everybody expects them to take a massive step back. But they end up just taking they take 3 steps back, and before the end of the season, they take 2 steps back forward. I expect that from Texas A&M. I think that their offensive line by this point in the season will have come together. Jimbo Fisher is a proven coach. I'm not sure he's the best X's and O's coach there is, but he does develop talent well. So this is going to be a tough game for Auburn. Like I said, at College Station, until we've proven that we can travel, this is going to be a very, very tough game for us to win. Now, here's something that may or may not sound like a hot take. I've said it earlier this spring. I believe under Derek Mason, Auburn leads the league in sacks in 2021. Now, we've got what I believe is the best secondary in the SEC. And Derek Mason's defenses traditionally have eaten one-dimensional offenses alive. So if they're going to be one-dimensional against us with lockdown corners, and we get to load the box to stop the run, I think this game can be interesting. The question will be, can we produce enough offense? You still got, no matter how much defense you play, you still got to score one more point than the other guy, right? Can we produce enough offense to win this game? And that's going to be the thing to watch in this one. But, I think it's going to be tough. Year one under Harsin, man, is going to be a really, really tough indoctrination into what it means to be a big-time coach in the SEC, right? He's making top 20 money, and he's got to prove it every week with games like this. But I got this in the L column for Auburn.
So next game, you come back home. After a tough game at Texas A&M, you play a Mississippi State team who Mike Leach is going to be in his second season. You knew the air raid. It started out really well for Mississippi State at the beginning of the season, but then towards the end of the season, you're like, I don't know if this is going to work out. And Mississippi State ultimately finds themselves at the bottom of the SEC West. With Kylan Hill exiting, is there any opportunity that you guys see for Mississippi State to actually go into Auburn and lose this game or win this game if you are Mississippi State? But is there any chance that Auburn loses this game? Like I have in my predictions, I had Mississippi State as an automatic win for Auburn this season. Is that what you guys are kind of feeling out of there? Or do you think that Mississippi State will be a way more competitive team this year and actually put up a good fight in Auburn this season?
I won't spend a lot of time on this one. This is a W because it has to be.
Yeah.
Cannot lose to Mike Leach. Now he is known to throw some wrinkles at you from time to time, but at the end of the day, they should not have the athletes to compete with us on the field. They just shouldn't. Not in this game. I mean, they started out with Costello last year. He threw for like 600 yards in his first game and then disappeared for the rest of the season. So this has got to be a W for Auburn here. There are not a lot of gimmies on this schedule this year. This has to be one. So I'm going with Auburn in this one. I think that we win this one. By this point in the season, we definitely understand what kind of offensive football team we are. We know we're going to be a dominant defensive team. And if they're doing a quarterback carousel again in this one, by this point in the season, they got no chance against Auburn. Definitely a dub in the column for us.
Let the national media tell you Mississippi State's one of the better teams in the country this year. Definitely have them highly ranked in the SEC. I'm not a believer yet. I am a believer in Mike Leach being able to get quarterbacks ready to play. But again, I think our secondary being the strength of our team, this is going to be another strength on strength battle. And what I'm definitely not a believer in yet is whether or not Mississippi State defensively has gotten much better. Mike Leach he's never had great defenses. I don't care where you've lined him up. The defenses have just been okay. And because of the style of offense that he plays, similarly to how we had issues defensively, if you're getting 3-and-out situations and you're putting that defense on the field consistently, they just wear down over time in a game. And so if we have the philosophy that I'm hoping that we do, which is ball control, we're going to be running the ball a lot. We're going to get a heavy dose of Tank, and we're going to have a very strong secondary that's going to be stingy against the pass. And if Mike is correct about our pass rush and we're able to get to the quarterback the way that we need to, I just don't see how Mississippi State produces enough points to win this game. It's not whether or not they're going to be competent on offense. It's just, can they score enough with very limited clock to be able to win that game? Right now, I'm not convinced that that's going to be able to happen.
Yeah, what you were talking about, the national media and everything, ESPN's Power Index or whatever that was, they had them 8th ranked overall in the nation, which I think is absolutely ludicrous. But again, I believe that this should definitely be a win for Auburn, and that's why I put them in the win category. And that brings us on to a big away game for Auburn, because obviously I'm a big South Carolina fan. This is the game that I'm really excited for. I can guarantee you I'm going to USC next year. I will guarantee you that I will be in Williams-Brice Stadium cheering as loud as I can for this game, because many different reasons. The storyline in this game honestly makes this, I don't have a problem with saying this is the Gamecocks game that I'm most excited for this season. You have Mike Bobo coming back to South Carolina. You got Tracy Rocker coming back to South Carolina. Lots of ex-Carolina coaches coming back into Williams-Brice Stadium. And just, there's so many good storylines. Like, you look at Marshawn Lloyd versus Tank Bigsby, two guys that were going at it for both. Both of our schools were going after both of those guys, and it splits. One goes one way, one goes the other way. That's going to be a huge showdown in the running game, also with Kevin Harris back there, and then you're going to have Shivers for Auburn. There's so many good storylines, and I could talk about South Carolina forever, but South Carolina is a team this year that their strengths come in bulk in certain positions and their weaknesses come in bulk in certain positions. Running back room is really, really strong, I tell you. Kevin Harris, SEC regular season leading rusher. You got Marshawn Lloyd, 4-star running back that is coming in that has immense amount of talent, and then even Zaquandre White in that running back room. Watch him in the spring game. He's looking to break out for South Carolina this year. You look at the D-line, Jordan Birch, Zach Pickens, Kinsley Enikbari, the leading SEC sack leader next season. It's where you look at the secondary, and it's where you look at the receivers room for South Carolina. That's the weaker point. I'm very interested to hear your guys' take on this game, because lots of people think with Shane Beamer coming in, again, that's another great storyline. Brian Harsin versus Shane Beamer, 2 first-year head coaches at 2 big SEC programs. I can't wait for this game. I'd love to hear your guys' take on this game, because not being a South Carolina Gamecocks fan, if you're not a South Carolina Gamecocks fan, you look at this game way differently than the way I do. So let's see it from an Auburn fan's perspective. How do you guys view going to South Carolina, going to Williams-Brice Stadium the week before the Iron Bowl, and how do you guys think you're going to perform there?
Yeah, I'm gonna keep saying it until I see our offense travel. I'm not gonna be super happy with what I have as prospects for that. What I will say is that if at this point in time our young receiving core has gelled, I like our chances against what is going to be an inexperienced secondary. Though by this point in the season, you can't really call anybody inexperienced, but it's just not as seasoned as they had been previously. The corners, J.C. Horn and Makwamu, I believe is his name, no longer in South Carolina, so they're going to have to figure out some other people on the outside. So if we found receivers that can be go-to guys and we can really be able to test the secondary, that's going to loosen things up for our running backs, which again, by this point in time, everybody's going to have figured out we got to stop Tank. But I think South Carolina thought that they could do that last time. And Tank actually had a really great game, if not for some really boneheaded plays on offense with some inopportune turnovers. I think we see a different game. Shi Smith is no longer there for South Carolina in the wide receiver room, and he was really a big focal point for them offensively last year. A brand new offensive coordinator, of course, because the offensive coordinator is now playing for Auburn. We don't even know what the offensive identity is going to be for South Carolina yet. Tracy Rocker actually is not at Auburn right now, so he's not going to be returning there. He went on to the NFL, so we do have a different defensive line coach. But we talked about a revenge game in the other direction for Arkansas. I believe this is going to be a revenge game for a lot of people who are suiting up for Auburn. So I anticipate us coming out fired up for this game. But again, until our offense proves that they can travel, I don't really know what I'm going to pick for us, but I do think that I'll put this in a toss-up column for now. South Carolina's got a lot of stuff that they need to do to make me a believer in them, though. So I can tentatively nudge us into the win column, but I'm still not ready to make a call on this game yet.
Ike did a wonderful job breaking that down from a completely analytical standpoint. I'm gonna take a little bit of a different approach. So this is pretty much going to be the battle of which coach figured it out faster. Right. Again, you pointed out, Noah, that we got 2 first-year SEC head coaches. I think that Brian Harsin has the tougher job here, because of the system switch that he's trying to implement versus what South Carolina is going to be doing offensively. Right. Trying to get a quarterback who has never taken a real snap, a meaningful snap under center his entire football career. And now asking him to do more pro-style things is going to make this game more interesting than it should be. In my opinion, this was the game that got Gus fired from Auburn, right? This was the game last year where J.C. Horn played himself into the first round of the draft, right? You mentioned that Harris, your running back, had a great day against Auburn that day. Right. So there's lots of storylines here. These guys are just I feel bad for these coaches sometimes because, when you look at this, Auburn has dominated this series. And still look at last year. You're not immune because it's the SEC and everybody has talent. You noted what kind of talent that you guys have there now. Even in lieu of the talent that left, right? But what's going to be the kicker for South Carolina is whether Shane Beamer can get the most out of the talent he has by the end of the season. Everybody's trying to figure out identity, right? And this is your next to last game of the season. And the question is simply going to be what will be a home game for South Carolina. Have you figured it out? So what you're really asking me is, has South Carolina figured it out by this point in the season? And are Auburn fans already calling for Brian Harsin's head on the stick? I'm tentatively going to give Auburn the W on this one, but not with a whole lot of conviction because there are a lot of things that can happen between September and the second to last game in November. So I've got this one circled on my calendar as well, too. We're either going to be really happy, I think, with what we're seeing or one of our fan bases are going to be really upset. So I got this in the W column for Auburn.
Yeah, for sure. Both of you guys hit the head on the nail where you look at the impact players of that game last season. Shi Smith, J.C. Horn. J.C. just got picked 8th overall last night in the NFL draft. Shi Smith's going off to the draft. Ike, you mentioned Israel Mukuamu, who's actually a guest on one of our interviews we had him on. Great guy. He's leaving as well. So a lot of the experience that South Carolina brought to that Auburn game and a lot of the talent that we had there that really pushed us over the edge in that Auburn game. Obviously, J.C. Horn getting the 2 big picks and then pass deflecting another one to Jalen Dickerson, who that one got picked as well. And then Shi Smith climbing the ladder in the end zone, making one big touchdown catch. And then he also had a massive juggling catch on the sideline that really changed the trajectory of this game. It's going to be tough. Like, of course, I'm a Gamecocks fan. I want us to win. And of course, I'm going to be more biased towards the Gamecocks winning. But I think that this is a just great SEC showdown of 2 first-year head coaches. You'll see the same thing when, let's say, South Carolina and Tennessee go at it. I'm not sure about like Tennessee Vanderbilt and South Carolina Vanderbilt because I know Vanderbilt's program is kind of a step below us 3, but having any of those first-year coaches, any of those 3, you look at Heupel, you look at Harsin, and you look at Beamer, any of those 3 going at it will be a very, very entertaining game. So definitely that's going to be one that is marked on my schedule. And then let's talk about the Iron Bowl. You get the Iron Bowl at home. You play your rivals at home. It should be, I don't know what to expect in this game, if I'm going to be honest, because Alabama, they're projected to be the number 1 team in the country. This offense, I don't think is going to take its foot off the gas at all. Yes, you lose Mac Jones, you lose Najee Harris, you lose Devontae, you lose Jalen Waddle, you lose Leatherwood, you lose Dickerson. There's still so much talent on this team everywhere. Bryce Young, watching him in the spring game, yes, he still had some quote-unquote freshman mistakes, even though this is his second season, but he still looks really good. John Mechie, Ajayi Hall, you look at Billingsley, you look at Neal on the offensive line, you look at Brian Robinson in the running game. So much talent all over the field for Alabama's offense. Alabama's defense, I honestly feel like can be beaten. You can score on Alabama. It's just the whole question is, will this Auburn offense be able to put up 50 plus points in this game? Because let's be honest, Alabama is going to be running up the scoreboards like they did last season. Will Auburn be able to have that very, very good? Is Tank Bigsby going to have a big game? Is a guy like Kenyon going to have a big game? Who is going to be that guy that if Auburn is able to go up and put up a lot of points, will have a big game for Auburn? And let's say come out with another Iron Bowl victory in an odd year in Jordan-Hare Stadium, where it just seems like there'd be some magic sometimes in that stadium.
So in Alabama, we like to say you throw out the record books for this one. I haven't been saying that lately. Now Gus did beat Alabama and Saban more than any other coach in the SEC over the stretch that he coached there. So they're not unbeatable. Now their talent is a step above, not only because they recruit well, but because they develop better than anybody in the country. So if you come to Alabama a 5-star, you're leaving a first-round draft pick. Look at the first round of the NFL draft, right? Like 6 guys in the first round, and at least another 2 in the second round. So they've got talent, but you can out X's and O's Saban. We've proven that. You can out-coach him on the field, with competent talent and a good game plan. So I think the story of this game really is going to be what kind of play caller is Bill O'Brien going to be in place of Steve Sarkisian, right? I think that Sark called probably the greatest game I've ever seen in a national title game last year, right? I mean, he was phenomenal. And when you lose that kind of play caller, it cannot be understated. Now, Saban has done a really, really good job hiring coordinators over the last 10 years. And when he hired Lane Kiffin, I thought that marked the beginning of the end for a lot of us in the SEC, because he was moving away from 3 yards in a cloud of dust football to something more modern, understanding that you have to score points and you can't, that old adage about defense winning championships, and I'm not so sure anymore. So in this game, this will be about, if Auburn has any chance, we're going to have to score defensively. Special teams is going to have to play a factor, right? And whoever's playing quarterback at this point cannot turn the ball over, because like you said, Noah, I mean, they're scoring points. They're putting up points. And even though I expect our defense to be stout, if you're losing the time of possession battle and they're on the game, they're on the field the entire game, I expect them to break. I don't expect them to last if we cannot move the ball and keep our defense off the field, which has been a problem for Auburn, over the last few years. In 2019, when we beat Bama, that was a championship level defense. We lost the time of possession battle bad that season. So they were on the field a lot. Derek Brown, Marlon Davidson, those guys we gave LSU, record-setting LSU, the toughest game they had all year. Right? We gave Joe Burrow the toughest game he had all year. So there's talent here. There's talent to work with. I've got this in the L column for Auburn, unfortunately. I don't think that anybody with any real integrity could say that we're going to win this game unless a miracle happens, because that's when we generally have beat them over the last 10 years. It's been all miracles. It's sad to say, again, it's the University of Nick Saban, not Alabama. It's him. He's doing a great job up there. That's really all I can say about it. I just hope that what we show in this game is that we're competent, right? Guys know their assignments, right? And that we're competitive in this game. By the time you get to the Iron Bowl, this is where you want your team to have some pride in a game that nobody expects you to win. You go out there and you lay it all on the field and you play your heart out. And you let the cards fall where they may. Everybody has to do their job. Coaches have to do their job. Players have to do their job. And maybe we get a 2013 miracle or 2010 miracle, right? But no, I've got this in the L column for Auburn, unfortunately.
Yeah, this is going to be a tough game. I don't care what season it is. Because we're at home, I'm going to give us a puncher's chance, right? Like we have the opportunity. I've been saying this over and over again about offense not traveling. We don't have to travel in this case, right? So I feel as if if we can, if Mike is right about the way that we can get after the passer, right? If we can give Bryce Young headaches, then we've got an opportunity, because we're going to make it where they have to slow the clock down. Then they're going to have to run the ball a lot. They're going to have to figure out how to do some things play action wise to fool us into some opportunities. I'm not convinced that we're going to be there yet in year one, though. It's difficult for me to make an intellectual leap to see us close that gap so significantly, even with all of the talent that Alabama lost last year, just because we haven't seen them struggle even after losing a bunch of talent. You can't name a year where they've just really just been down, in even as a year where they've lost a lot of talent. So I'm not ready to take that leap with us yet. I'm going to have to see us show it on the field before I can say that I can predict an Iron Bowl victory. At home, though, I do give us a puncher's chance, but I'm not ready to go there yet.
Yeah, and all these games that I've heard you guys been talking about, no matter who the opponent is, it always sounds like you have confidence in this offense at home because you don't need to travel. And in that case, I feel like Auburn should have some kind of saying, like, let's say when the eagle flies, or if the eagle flies, the offense will rise, just something like that. That just sounds like something you guys have been really, really strong about, is every time that this offense plays at home, we have a chance to beat whoever comes into Auburn. And that's the case this year. Alabama comes into Auburn, and if this offense performs the way that you guys hope to be, it could be another shootout in Auburn, where usually Auburn will come out on top. So how I like to end these videos, guys, is I'm going to ask you guys your highest ceiling for Auburn this season. Like, obviously, highest ceiling, you could say, oh, we're going to go 12-0 in the regular season. Lowest ceiling is 0-12, and then realistic. So I'm going to ask you, like, realistically, in your mind, what is the highest ceiling this Auburn team could go in Brian Harsin's first season? What is the lowest floor that Auburn could go, meaning what do you think their worst record will be? And then give me what you guys think, your kind of realistic range of where do you think this Auburn team will range in their record this season?
I think the floor for this team is 6-6, right? I believe that, there are 4 definite wins on this schedule, and then you just got to win 2 others. So the floor is 6-6. I think the ceiling is 8-4 or 9-3. And I'm leaning towards 8-4, right? I think 8 wins is a solid season in Brian Harsin's first year. It means that, you're winning games you're supposed to. So the morale of the team is still where it can be. And you need to be competitive in those 4 losses. So who do I have as the 4 losses? Well, with Georgia, Bama, Texas A&M, Penn State, right? Now, there could be some other losses. You could swap some of those. Maybe we beat Penn State and lose one of those October games, right? But at the end of the day, this team, I think anything better than 9-3 is something went wrong around us, right? Like, I mean, because again, it's football. It's a two-way sport, right? So we sit here and we talk about and we analyze what our team could do. But the truth is that the wheels could fall off for teams around us as well too. You can have a perfect storm that might end up with a better record than most expected. But I don't think that the progress of this team can be measured truly by record. I think you can go 6-6 and still show that you're headed the right direction. I believe that. 7-5, still headed the right direction if you're competitive in the losses and guys look competent. So, 8-4 is likely where this team lands. That's my realistic expectation for Auburn in 2021.
Yeah, I'm going to echo the exact same thing. I don't think it's realistic for us to think about 10, 11, 12 wins this season, just because there's so much that we need to be able to do. Listen, as an Auburn fan, I'd be elated if we were able to get that high in the win column. I just don't know that it's realistic. There's still a lot of football left to be played. There's a lot of things that we need to iron out that's not solidified about our team to be able to ascend to that level, knowing what we have to go up against. It's not as if everybody else is just going to lay down just because Auburn decided that we wanted to step up, right? So everybody's trying to get better. And so can we close those gaps significantly enough to win more than 9 wins? I don't feel like we're there yet. As far as the floor, 6-6, same place. If we don't win 6 games next season, the rumbles are going to get really loud really quickly in the Plains. Like I don't foresee us having 3 relatively cupcake games and then some winnable games on the lower end of the SEC West, and you come out of that situation not getting at least 2 of those. It's a problem, right? That's a huge problem for us to not be able to get 3 cupcakes and then 3 other W's in the SEC. So if we're not going to do that, then we've got a lot of stuff that we need to figure out, and someone hasn't been pulling the trigger on getting people to sit down that aren't stepping up properly on our team. And that's going to be a problem for me as a fan. So the low end 6-6, the high end, I'll say 9 wins. But I expect us to win 7 to 8 in a perfect storm of things around the season.
That's like what I'm kind of saying is the same thing. Where like, I think easy expectation is this team at least makes a bowl game. And what you said, Mike, especially where you could still see some tremendous progress in this football program as a whole with just being competitive against Alabama or even traveling. Like, let's say you don't beat Penn State, you don't beat Texas A&M, but you're still able to be competitive in those games and show what you guys really, really want to emphasize is, can this offense travel? Can this offense go on the road and still perform kind of to the same identity that you'd see at home? So I have somewhere around the same. Like bottom floor, I have like 5-7, somewhere around there. You look at high ceiling, I have this team going again around 8-4, and then realistic, I have like 7-5 for Auburn this season. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me, guys. Especially, please go check out the War Report. If you guys liked what you're seeing here, I highly suggest go subscribe to them, and don't only subscribe to them, but check out their channel memberships. I've looked into that. If you want the best and exclusive content on Auburn football and just football in general, if you guys want to see some really, really cool stuff, I highly suggest you go check out their channel membership. I think it's only like $6 a month. You are not going to complain at all. The work and the effort that these guys put in, it's not just these two. They have a whole bunch of other guys on this team that really just make and build such a great community that I'm going to be honest, I really admire what they're doing over there on their channel. So definitely check them out. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this video. Hit the like button down below, subscribe down below, comment anything about Auburn football. Thank you for watching, and definitely come back next time.